Welcome to Therapy Inspired. As therapists, we have a unique view of the world. We hold space for grief and trauma, yet we also witness resilience and healing, all while being humans ourselves. We hope to share helpful psychoeducational insights from our role as a psychotherapist in and out of the therapy room. And while we'll be talking about things therapy related, listening and engaging in this podcast doesn't equate a client therapist relationship. And though we might be using insights from our work with various clinical issues, we don't reference specific cases. I'm Kameela Osman. I'm a registered social worker and psychotherapist in Bowmanville, Ontario. I have a clinic, Elite Counseling and Consulting, where I do in-person sessions, and I also see clients virtually throughout Ontario.
My name is Darby Crosby, and I'm the owner of Crosby Counseling and Wellness, where I see individuals, couples, and families on a virtual secure platform. In Therapy Inspired, we've been recently talking a lot about self-talk, thinking traps, and we've discussed so far like self-criticism, judgment, perfectionism, and today we want to touch on a little bit of the distorted thought patterns that we can fall into, such as unhealthy comparisons, overthinking, jumping to conclusions, or even catastrophic thinking and more.
Yeah. As we've talked about with self-criticism and perfectionism, it's natural to have some levels of comparisons, but a form of unhealthy comparison is often called the thinking trap, called compare and despair. With this thinking trap, we're looking at differences, and instead of feeling ambitious or inspired, we might get a sense of feeling of failure and defeat. So we're making that comparison, and then it's leading us to despair. But the reality is, comparison isn't the thief of joy, which is different than that usual cliche. It's when we compare and we're negatively internalizing, allowing ourselves to feel less than. When we notice those differences, it doesn't have to take away from who we are. We can notice this and see it as an area of growth. We can still hold gratitude and appreciation for who we are. One of the things I think adds to the likelihood of compare and despair is the volume of comparabilities we have in our current world. I think in our previous world, before social media, before we were so interconnected, you may have comparisons with the people around you. And again, sometimes it may still go on the despair end, but with the volume of comparables we're exposed to on social media and the highlight reel, I think a lot of us have been exposed to that language and the reality that what we see in social media isn't the real background of a lot of people or the reality of what they're experiencing in their lives. And yet that becomes our comparison. So we're not only comparing, but we're comparing with false data, skewed data in that way. And that leads a lot of people to have more of this compare and despair thinking trap. We've even heard people talking about trying to hold social media companies accountable for their mental health impact. So if you're on social media a lot, you may want to pay attention to how much are you comparing and despairing. A practical tip for compare and despair is to consider what's actionable. When you notice yourself comparing, as I said, it's a natural thing that the mind does. How can you use it in that more proactive way? Can you think about, what is this thing that I'm despairing about that I want? What is the actual desire there, the need? And how can you pause and explore instead of despairing, explore what are some steps you could be taking, even if it's small steps to start to put you on the trajectory towards those desires.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a lot of that sort of fear of missing out or whatever, that it's artificially sort of created by what we're seeing on social media and even TV shows.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads into a little bit of the next sort of track, which is overthinking and rumination. So rumination is when we sort of go over something over and over and over again, and it's kind of a circular thought pattern. So it doesn't become productive. It's just like, I should have said this, or I should have done that. And what happens if? And so it's a lot of sort of your inability to be able to sort of calm yourself down in those moments, like Kameela was saying before. And what is it that I'm stuck on? What is it that I need to do to move forward? Ask yourself if this is something that's really important to you. Ask yourself if this is something that you really do need to sort of work on and to move forward on, right? So I think it's really important that it's almost like doing a reality check, right? To slow yourself down and think, is this something that I really need to spend this much time?
Mm. Yeah, one of those other thinking traps is the fortune telling or jumping to conclusions. In this thinking trap, we're usually making negative predictions about the future, and then we're basing the current actions or reactions off of this. And so that's why it's a distorted thinking, because it's not fact. It's based off of our skewed predictions. I recently did a blog article that includes a worksheet on different strategies for challenging this particular thinking trap, fortune telling, or jumping to conclusions. You can check it out on my website, elitec-c.com.
The next one is catastrophic thinking. And I know that sounds really big and everything else, but I like to sort of think about it also as overestimating danger, overestimating what could happen. And this is a thinking trap where we sort of amplify things that could happen, not that they have, and we make things worse than they actually are. Um, I saw a lot of this when we were in the pandemic, like a lot of people, since this was the first time for everybody, a lot of people were unsure. And so they started thinking that terrible things are going to happen, and they started to create different narratives. And again, what we need to do is to be able to sort of think about, what is real, do a reality check, slow our thinking down, and be able to sort of estimate the danger in a really realistic kind of a matter, in a way. Right? We want to make sure that, like, even if you're trying to get pregnant and stuff like that, there are a lot of things that can go awry. And so we worry too much about all of these things. Should I sit in a hot tub? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, and it's really about, trying to find ways of minimizing that sort of vulnerability, accepting the vulnerability in whatever the moment is, and being able to sort of move forward and support yourself and say, no, we can do this. This is okay.
Yeah, you're right. I do see that a lot in the perinatal period that especially if there's a struggle with fertility, that overestimating danger can stay with a mom once there is pregnancy, or even if there isn't that struggle with fertility, just the vulnerability in that period that leaves that stuckness in overestimating the danger that's there. I will say that also, to go along with that, that if we find ourselves having lots of catastrophic overestimating danger, if we're finding ourselves stuck in that a lot, it is symptomatic of other mental health struggles. It is one of those things to pay attention to like if it's stopping you from living life, if it's stopping you from going after what you want, then it might be something to talk about with a health professional, even though there are some ways of balancing that we'll discuss. The other sort of thinking trap that comes to mind is dichotomous thinking, which is a big word, but it's the idea of all or nothing thinking. So either it's one way or the other, there's some rigidity. And sometimes when we grow up with that rigidity, or we've developed a sense of rigidity for ourselves, we can fall into this thinking trap of all or nothing thinking. And it can be short-sighted, and it can leave us in distress, feeling like we have less options, because if it's not, if I'm not going to be able to clean the kitchen, I'm, feeling like I don't have time to do it. If I feel like I need, half an hour and it's really, just 10 minutes, if I'm stuck in that all or nothing thinking, or if I feel like I can't, take on a project in its full length, I may feel like maybe I shouldn't be putting my hand up to say, yes, I want it, even though I really do. So you may be holding yourself back in a lot of ways. And so one of the things with the dichotomous thinking is to ask yourself, what else do I know? And very similar with overestimating danger, you can do a bit of like reality checking, balance thinking. So we're talking about challenging some of these thinking traps through more self-talk, to ask yourself, okay, what else do I know? Is this accurate? Or are there other ways of looking at this? So sometimes contrasting those ideas can be another strategy. Can these two ideas in these all or nothing thinking trap? Can they coexist with each other? Is that an option? Can it be I'm scared to do something, but I know it will be helpful for me in the long run? Can it be, I don't know if I can do this whole project, but I know I can ask for support, or I know I can figure it out along the way. And so I'm going to still take on the challenge of it.
Right, and that leads us into sort of a very similar kind of behavior, which is minimizing or magnifying. So both minimizing and magnifying are a way of avoiding something that could be in place. So minimizing, I'm just sort of trying to say, oh, it's not as bad as I think it is. And it's a form of sort of avoidance. And sometimes that can be helpful, but sometimes that also is a way of not dealing with something that we need to deal with. And it's really important that we sort of see, again, like we've been saying in this presentation today, is like really do the reality checks and look at them. And magnifying is just the opposite. It's that making a very tiny, small issue into this huge, big deal. And that keeps us stuck in that moment too, so that we can't sort of move forward and do things that we need to do, right? And we're clouding sort of real issues. So with all of these sort of thinking traps, one of the things that we really need to sort of think about is we do the reality check-in, we look at, what's real, what's not, how am I, making this bigger than I need to or smaller than it should be. And again, trying to find strategies that help us self-soothe, be able to sort of distract ourselves, not from the standpoint of avoiding and not seeing it, but to channel our energy into something a little bit different and more meaningful and helpful and supportive to ourselves, right? So that we can carry on. Like Kameela just said, maybe you do need to talk to somebody, so that you get a different sort of reality check and get some more grounding so that you can create the energy you need to move forward.
And there are other thinking traps that we haven't covered, but the idea is that it's a good idea to notice what's the quality of your thoughts and be willing to reassess them. And as Darby said, question, is it helpful or unhelpful? And that channeling that energy, that, reassessment is to realign with doing things that are helpful for you, that are aligned with your values and what you want for yourself. In the next episode, we'll be continuing to explore other mindset challenges.
Thank you for watching.